It's Nolan.
Now, before we get started, make sure y'all hitting that like button. Make sure y'all sharing it on your respective platforms. Let somebody know what we're doing today. Now, let's get into the show.
Hustle healthy, gotta lay yourself. Yeah. Protect your pieces like you do your wealth. That's right. Keep on striving for your mental health. Keep striving. Cause you can't live your life for no one else. Yeah. Hustle healthy, gotta lay yourself. It's true. Protect your pieces like you do your wealth. Yeah. Keep on striving for your mental health. Keep striving. Cause you can't live your life for no one else. Starting out, we get subjected to the grind. Money on my mind, trying to find a way to shine. Planning with my people, about to divvy up the pie. On a mission just to rise, need our businesses to thrive. Yeah. Watching social, it's easy to lose balance. See the competition and take it all as a challenge. Isolated in silence, feel like you on the island. Nobody understands, you just wanna get a status. But yo, all the stress gets suppressed in your chest. Start to feel it in your back, or the tightness in your neck. Gotta learn to get some rest, even chasing your success. If you don't keep it in check, you gon' have some deep regrets on me. Look, think about your family and the life you building. Cause it's more than the money, it's about your children. Our careers don't make us, but they can't break us. So many people fit the mold, but we can't let it shape us. Yeah. Hustle healthy, gotta lay yourself. Protect your pieces like you do your wealth. Yeah. Keep on striving for your mental health. Keep striving. Cause you can't live your life for no one else. Yeah. Hustle healthy, gotta lay yourself. Protect your pieces like you do your wealth. Yeah. Keep on striving for your mental health. Cause you can't live your life for no one else.
What's going on, beautiful people? It's the kid J Nolan here. Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Industry, your number one source for music, entertainment, commentary, and breakdowns. Hope everybody's doing well out there this weekend. Now, y'all know, Thursday and Friday, my entire lineup was completely stacked with all of the things going on in hip-hop, all the diss records coming out, all the the drama, the ups and downs, the commentary around it, not to mention all of this stuff going on with all these other people in the industry. Therefore, I did not have time to cover Thursday and Friday of Cassie being on the stand during this Diddy trial, or any of the Diddy trial for that matter, because as y'all could tell, when I'm covering these videos, when I'm covering the trial and the testimony and going through word for word and all of this stuff, the videos are an hour plus, right? So in the midst of me doing an hour plus videos, my typical runtime is really somewhere between 18 to 25 minutes. So that's double the time, all right? So for anybody that's thinking that I was shying away from the subject matter and not covering it because of whatever was going on in the courtroom, that's absolutely false. I just really did not have time. I literally said in the beginning, I may not be able to get to it, right? But now weekend is here, you know what I mean? Actually about to resume the trial tomorrow. So let's do let's play catch up with the last couple days that happened. And Inner City Press actually released a bit more extra stuff afterwards, so I could kind of catch up. So what I'm going to do here is talk about number one, we're going to get into Cassie's husband and the things that he said, because a lot of people were wondering, how he felt having to sit there and endure through these stories that she's telling on the stand. I don't personally believe that she's saying much that he hasn't heard before, But also, we're going to get into Dawn Richard and her limited testimony and how they're trying to strike her testimony from the record and not use that as valid. We're going to get into all of those things, them trying to, poke around at Cassie's credibility as they got into cross-examination, all that stuff. We're getting into it, all right? So first, let me get into her husband, and then we're going to get right to Inner City, what they had published. So Alex has come to the people, and he says, over the past 5 days, the world has gotten to witness the strength and bravery of my wife, freeing herself of her past. There's been speculation online surrounding how it must feel for me to sit there and listen to my wife's testimony. I have felt so many things sitting there. I have felt tremendous pride and overwhelming love for Cass. I have felt profound anger that she has been subjected to sitting in front of a person who tried to break her. So, to him and all of those who helped him along the way, please know this. You did not. You did not break her spirit nor her smile that lights up every room. You did not break the souls of a mother who gives the best hugs and plays the silliest games with our little girls. You did not break the woman who has made me a better man. Okay? I believe there's more to this. To those who say he saved her, he says, I did not save Cassie, as some have said. To say that is an insult to the years of painful work my wife has done to save herself. Cassie saved Cassie. She alone broke free from abuse, coercion, violence, and threats. She did the work of fighting the demons that only a demon himself could have done to her. All I have done is love her as she has loved me. Her life is now surrounded by love, laughter, and our family. This horrific chapter is forever put behind us, and we will not be making additional statements. We appreciate all of the love and support we have received, and we ask that you respect our privacy as we welcome our son into a world that is now safer because of his mom. Okay? So that comes from Cassie's husband, Alex. So there's that. And I think next week they'll be getting past Cassie. All right? So they'll be moving on to other witnesses and endeavors within the trial. Of course, she is on the last trimester of her pregnancy, so they had to get what they could while they could. She was only allotted for a week. All right. Now let's get into what transpired. As previously stated, Inner City Press has created some additional documents to coincide with what was live tweeted during the trial. So we've got a bit more streamlined documents here to go through the testimony. This is day 4 of the trial, which means this was Thursday. So let's get into how this went down, all right? Judge says, Mr. Agnifilo, I thought you were going to take this off my plate. Okay. Agnifilo says, I will keep trying. This is the main witness. She stands by herself. That said, we have been doing this all night until 3 a.m. We flagged exhibits for them. And when the judge says, I thought you were going to take this off my plate, the judge is basically talking about these different exhibits that the defense is trying to bring to the table. They're trying to, get some clarity on what is and what isn't supposed to be brought up to Cassie. Basically blindsiding her on the stand and all of these different things. So they've been trying to get this thing worked out for days. Okay. U.S. Attorney Slavic says there are 24 exhibits that the government has objections to. They are listed in the chart. Judge says just the ones in the chart. Again, these judicial documents are not going to be in the public. They're not going into the public docket. Not the case in many other SDNY trials, meaning that some of the information and documents and exhibits and things that the defense is bringing to the table, for whatever reason, they're not being submitted into the actual court docket for the viewing public or just for the public record. Okay, that's a footnote by Inner City Press there. So the judge says, bring the jury in. Jury enters. Combs' lawyer Estavio says, Ms. Ventura, you loved Mr. Combs, correct? Cassie says, I did. Estavio says, for 11 years, you took care of him. She says, in some ways. You called him larger than life. Cassie says, I did. Others called him Diddy or Puff Daddy, but you called him Sean, right? She says, yes. You know a version of him the rest of the world couldn't see, right? Objection! Overruled. Cassie says, in ways. You kept coming back to him for 11 years? Cassie says, I wouldn't say coming back, right? Because that's one of the narratives out there is that she kept coming back to him. She had every opportunity to leave. But again, if it were that easy, she probably wouldn't have been getting beaten along the way. Probably wouldn't be hooked on drugs. And then we'll keep it going, And people could say I'm biased. I really don't give a fuck. Okay? I've made it very clear. This nigga can fry. But whatever. She says, I wouldn't say coming back. Estavio says, you believed he loved you too. She said, I did believe he loved me too. So when he cheated on you, it hurt. She says, not every time. Estavio says, bring up this defense exhibit. Objection! Not in evidence. Judge says that's true. This is not in evidence. Estavio says, Miss Ventura, read it just to yourself. Why did you send this message? She says, to let him know I was going to dinner. Estavio comes back. What was going on when these messages were sent? Cassie says, I'm not sure. What was going on in your relationship then? She says, it was early. We were loving. Okay, Estavio says, I offer it. Objection! Being offered for the truth. Overruled. Estavio says, please read. Cassie says, I wrote, I love you, smiley face. I'll fly anywhere for you. I love you, Cass. Okay, Estavio, this 2009 email. Objection, hearsay. Judge says, Mrs. Estavio, ask more questions. All right, so the judge is seemingly all ready to be irritated with these objections. Estavio says, from BlackBerry, what is BG? Cassie says, baby girl. What did you write? Cassie states, you hungry, Pop Pop? And Mr. Combs wrote to you, we are so in love, we don't do anything else. How long had you been seeing each other? Cassie, like 2.5 years. All right, please read this. 1364, Cassie says, I haven't talked to you at all. You don't even try. You rush me off the phone. I'm really hurt. I don't need your money. I need some attention. They ask, you wanted your special time with Mr. Combs? She says yes. You testified that you told him, I love you so much, you make me a better woman. Cassie says, I definitely wrote those messages. You wrote, I can't wait until we have a baby of our own, which I'm so glad they didn't, but let's continue. You knew that he had 6 children at the time? She says yes. So now, these messages about freak off. When you say, you know, it doesn't matter to me, you mean weekend or weekday, either is fine? Cassie says, that's what it says. Mr. Combs says, maybe we can call Jules. Can you do it? Yes. Estavio, this was an explicit message from you about the anticipated upcoming freak off. Objection! Judge says we will take a recess. At this point, they break. 10:48 a.m. They come back. This is Thursday, okay? Day 4 of the trial. Judge says, Mrs. Estavio, you may proceed. Okay? Ms. Ventura, this is from Mr. Combs to you. You respond with an extremely explicit message, right? She says yes. This is 2 days after the planning of a freak-off, right? Cassie says yes. He said, I want to see. How did you reply? She says, I can't wait either. You wrote, I feel like I want to fuck, right? She says, that's what it says. Mr. Combs says, I'm so horny I can't concentrate. What do you say? Cassie states that I'll go to Dwayne Reed for candles and then set up the room. Did you understand that he was going to take another video of you? Objection, speculation. Judge says, Miss Estavio, you can move on. You ask, any pills on you? She says yes. What pills were you taking then? She says opiates. You deleted videos on your devices, right? Cassie says yes. What did you write? She said that I need to feel this is my husband, the only one who will see this side of me. Okay? Were you afraid that Mr. Combs was only seeing you for sex in this way? She says that was a concern. You still were not public in your relationship with him. Correct. So at this point, I think they said they've been together for 2 years now in a private relationship, doing private freak-offs, taking drugs. But at this point, he was not going public with her, let it be known that they were an item. Okay. She says she was concerned that he was only using her for this sexual connection. You still were not public? Correct. Were freak-offs important? Integral to us. Who was at your 21st birthday party in Las Vegas? She says Britney Spears, Dallas Austin. How did you get them there? She says they came for Sean. You're very beautiful and charming. Cassie says thank you. He says it's true. Estavio, or she says, I don't know, whomever, they. Who is Tommy Mottola? Cassie says, a well-known producer. You are an up-and-coming star. Cassie says, I guess you could say that. After you signed with Bad Boy, things were still platonic. Cassie says, yes. You had rough performance. 106 in Park. It did not go well for me, Cassie says. How did he help you after that? She says, we did a YouTube video. He says, everybody makes mistakes. What was wrong? She says, I couldn't hear myself. So she did a performance on 106 in Park, and she could not hear herself in the monitors you put in your ear, the in-ear monitor, to where you can, if the crowd is too loud, the music's too loud, you'll have that in your ear so you can follow along and put on a good performance without having to overly strain your voice to try to hear yourself, okay? Estavio says, you were dating Mr. Leslie. How much older than you was he? So now they bring Ryan Leslie into the fold, right? She says he was 10 years older than her. Then you traveled to Miami with Mr. Combs. The flyer of the event was just a cover to spend time with Mr. Combs, right? Interesting. She says that's true. You had a tattoo of Mr. Leslie's initials on your body, right? Yes. How many tattoos did you have then? Objection, relevance. Judge says overruled, but let's keep it moving. She says 3. Okay. So at this time, what it seems to me is they're trying to bring up the fact that she is into dating older men at this very tender age. Okay. She was introduced into the industry somewhere along the lines of 17, 18 years old. Ryan Leslie was 10 years older than her, pushing 30. Hey, you know, that could be very problematic as well, especially if she was 17 when they met. I can't co-sign that. That's fucked up. That ain't right. That's grooming. And we all know. So in this case, Ryan Leslie got his ass off smooth because Diddy did so much other shit that anything he did in the public eye pales in comparison. But nah, nigga, you need to atone for your sins too, fuck nigga. But let's continue. Okay. The one on your arm, no regrets. Estavio says, Mr. Combs taught you how to do oral sex. Cassie says he did. Look at this. Tell me when you're ready. Can you read it? She says, you can read it. It's making me laugh. It's from 2007. You wrote, I feel protected. You are sweet. Okay, so this is around the time that she was still dating Ryan Leslie. She was new to the industry, etc. Okay. You wrote, I see that Carrie is better fitting for you. I'm hurt that you think I'm malicious. You're very important to me. Cassie then laughs. Okay. So at this time, she's letting Diddy know that Carrie Morgan is probably a better fit for her. For whatever reason, she says, I'm hurt that you think I'm malicious. I don't know. It would be nice if the text message was given. I don't know if y'all have seen it or heard it from somebody else, but I would love to know the context of how they got to him thinking she's malicious. Okay. Estavio says, what were you trying to convey? She said, it's like a journal entry. Estavio, you discussed Carrie Morgan. Did you think Mr. Combs was attracted to her? She says, there was a point in the very beginning. Did that complication carry on in your relationship? Cassie says, not really. Carrie was just always with us. I'd like to start asking about freak-offs. Sometimes you wore a wig and a mask. She says, yes. The general public did not know. Objection. Rephrase. No one knew until November of 2023 in the public. Cassie says, yes. That they was freaking off. Fair to say his career was ruined after your lawsuit? Cassie says, I could understand that. Let's read these messages. Mr. Combs wrote, when are you on your period? She says, not now. What you be thinking about when you horny? I guess that's what Diddy asked her. Miss Ventura, if you don't want to read the answers, I can read them. Cassie says, thank you. Okay. Stavio says the O has lots of O's after them, right? She says, yes. After a freak off, you'd make love with Mr. Combs. Yes. Which, how on earth could you even continue? But we'll keep going. Estavio says, your period. Mr. Combs is asking you when you're on it, right? She says, yep. He's asking in the context of when to meet up and have sex. She says, looks like it. Sometimes you watched him with a female. She says 2 or 3 times. So there's other instances where she was watching him get it in with a woman, okay? Rather than a man or rubbing life force into his nipples, okay? Estavio says, did you talk with Mr. Combs about the swingers lifestyle? Cassie says that no one talks about it. Were you keeping freak off secret from your friends? She says yes. His assistants help him with everything. Okay, now this is again another indication. I have to say, people keep asking why Rico. Well, his assistants and his bad boy staff was helping him to facilitate these things. All right, so that is enterprise. Now, why no one else has been arrested or incriminated in this way? I don't know what type of deals them niggas worked out to be taken away from this. Just saying. Estavio says, you will remember if an assistant came in during one of your sessions with an escort? She says, not necessarily. I was high. So you don't remember much. She said, I had my privacy invaded a lot during that relationship. I would say probably too much to remember, but we'll continue. This is from July 2012. You say to Mr. Combs, I'm horny and bored. This was after a freak off, right? Cassie says, there are a lot of texts here. This is a footnote by Inner City Press. It's said to be 25 pages. He says, where will defense exhibits ostensibly entered into evidence be available? Okay, so he's still questioning why all of these documents are still not being submitted. Okay. U.S. Attorney Johnson says, I would ask that the witness be allowed to read the entire document. Judge says, how many pages? Estavio says 8. U.S. Attorney says, we don't have a copy for the witness. Estavio says, we'll show it on the screen, but not in the public gallery. Estavio, you said Mr. Combs often put you down, but he also sent you encouragement and called you a queen, right? She says, yes. Sidebar. What would trigger Mr. Combs, incessant calls to you? She says, anger, doubt about where I was. If he suspected you of cheating, he'd call you incessantly. She says that was one of the reasons. Estavio, because he thought, objection, that's sustained. Estavio says, do you believe Mr. Combs has good taste? Cassie says, I think he does. He's had an impact on fashion. She says people like his style. Sean John, did you consult with him on your look? She says, sometimes I got advice I didn't ask for. Okay, so perhaps she wasn't consulting him so much with her looks because she already had an idea what she wanted to do, and he was giving her unwarranted advice. That's what she's saying here. Estavio says he still ran his companies even while having all of these freak-offs, right? She says he did. What was he addicted to? Success, Cassie says, and laughs, which we also know is very true. You know what I mean? We've seen him on TV. You know, that fucking phone call. Motherfucker, I get what I want, I said. He threw that motherfucking phone. What substances? Opiates? She said, yes, he told me and I saw it. Okay. Did Mr. Combs' mood depend on whether or not he was withdrawing from opiates? She says he was more irritable, I would say. What other drugs was Mr. Combs addicted to? Objection, no foundation. Judge says, I'll ask if I want the grounds. Sustain, rephrase. What was his drug of choice? Cassie says, ecstasy or MDMA. Now, somebody wanted to debate with me about whether or not MDMA is Molly. That's what I thought it was. Y'all could tell me if I'm wrong. They said that the MDMA was just ecstasy. But she says ecstasy or MDMA, all right? Nothing of super major value, but just something I wanted to point out. We'll continue. Opiates Daily, she says when he was doing them, she says you saw him, Estavio says you saw him withdraw. Cassie says yes, judge will break. Juror leaves, witness leaves. Judge says, Miss Estavio, where are we in your cross? Estavio says, we have a lot of exhibits. Let me confer over lunch. Non-responsive, judge says, will you finish today or early tomorrow? Agnifilo says, to the end of tomorrow. We might not be able to finish tomorrow. This is the most important witness. Judge says, for months, we said this witness had to be off the stand by the end of the week. U.S. Attorney says our direct was a day and a half. Limit them to that. Judge says show Ms. Ventura the exhibits in advance. Maybe just ask her questions rather than these exhibits. We have a timing concern. Agnifilo says they called 2 witnesses to start. That wasn't our choice. It's a critically important witness. Judge says streamline things, okay? Y'all bringing all these documents and things that haven't even really been approved, but we trying to let y'all cook. Judge said y'all better get y'all shit together. Y'all taking too much time. She has a very limited window. Make sure y'all do ask your most effective questions, okay? Okay, so they break. Once again, they come back 110. Judge says, Mrs. Estavio, okay, so Estavio is a woman. Has the witness had a chance to review the exhibits? U.S. Attorney says they are lengthy. Judge says we'll do the best that we can. I was told this witness would be off the stand by the end of the week. We let the jury go early yesterday, so we cut shit early yesterday. So now we're working at a deficit and y'all overloading with all these exhibits and shit. Judge says if there's something that really needs to be done on cross after lunch tomorrow, I may allow it. We have to leave time for redirect. This witness is being responsive. She's cooperating, right? Cassie enters, so does the jury. Estavio says, let's turn to GX 411. U.S. Attorney Johnson says, it's not in evidence yet. Estavio says, so B 414, page 3 and 4, you wrote, I love our FOs as freak-offs when we both want it. You felt that? Cassie says, love and freak-offs were just words at that point, okay? So she's texting Diddy, hey, I love our freak-offs when we both want it, right? So they're asking, well, what do you mean by that? Because, again, they're trying to poke holes into her credibility to say, you don't like freak-offs, but then at some point, you say you do. Okay? She says love and freak-offs were just words at that point. So maybe she was excited by it early in the when she was first introduced to it. But I don't know when this text was or what she's talking about, right? We'll continue. Mr. Combs wrote to you, I want to freak out right now. And you wrote that you wanted it too. LOL, me too. Okay? Cassie says, I texted more than that. But you did text that to him. Mr. Combs wrote to you, Jules is available if you are into it. You could have said yes or no. And you said, love you. She says there was no yes or no. Okay? Bring up B420 on page 2. Mr. Combs wrote, do I have your permission to set up freaky fun? You wrote ovulation. As in she was on her period. She was trying to not do it. But she claims that Diddy was setting them up specifically during her period. So there's that. She says yes. Estavio says, here, what do you say? Cassie says, I asked which hotel. I must have called him in between. I don't want to assume anything. Okay. Estavio says, he said, montage, you said you could also go to Pleasure Chest. What would you get there? She says sexual supplies. What supplies? She says lubricants, outfits. He says have fun, impress me. You say okay. He says can we kiss a lot? What do you say? Yes. Okay. What's interesting is, even though he's setting up the freaky fun, I'm sure she really just wanted to have intimacy with him more than anything else. But he liked to include others. Okay. You wrote, I left the iPad. She says, I don't know whose iPad this meant. Estavio says, Mr. Combs wrote, I'll be there right after my session. Again, there's some typos in here. This was June 2017. Okay. All right. So this is later in the relationship, not in the early days. Do you remember arguments you were having at that time? She says, not specifically. Here you say the game starts at 10 p.m., no breaking character to 8 a.m. She says, this was a game a friend of mine told me, a way to rekindle your romance. Okay. So she's taking on this game that her friend told her about to try to reconnect with Diddy on an emotional level or something, right? To rekindle their romance, get them back in the loving stage that she felt they were in early on. Estavio says, by doing something different in the bedroom. She says it's a whole getting into character thing. Mr. Combs says, let's get some outfits and go to sex club. Okay, so he trying to go out and just get dirty in the club. No sex in the champagne room. Okay. Mr. Combs wrote, surprise package coming from out of state. Why can't I reach you? What do you say? She said, I was getting my brows done. Did you come to know Mr. Combs was leaving to freak off to go see Kim Porter? She says, yes. How did you find out about Gina? How did you feel? Did it upset you? She says, yes. Okay, so when she finds out that Diddy's spending time with Gina, she ain't like that shit. Okay, it prompted arguments. It did. And of course, there's plenty of quotes in here throughout the week where she said that she wanted to be his only girl, his main thing. However, that wasn't going to happen. And he thought you were not faithful. What were his reactions? He said it was scary. So he got to do what he wanted to do. He could spend time with Gina. He could spend time with Kim. He could go find other folks. He could freak off with other women in front of her. But when he suspected that she was doing her thing out in the streets, it was a problem. He wanted to blow up niggas' cars. He wanted to, you know what I'm saying? Totally different dynamic. Flexing the power. Mr. Combs wrote to you, let's do something different in NYC this weekend. FYI, Dave hit me. What does it mean? Reached out. And Daniel contacted you. Did this mean you might have a freak off? She said, might. Estavio, he tells you, you better put me on VIP vibrate alarm or something. He's frustrated you don't answer his text fast enough. She says, right. You tell him to come to NYC, understanding there could be a freak off. She says, maybe. You also saw the Book of Mormon. Interesting. Cassie says, yes, with a laugh. Masked Pleasures. Is that a sex club? Cassie says, I would assume. He asks, are you ready for the night? What do you say? Yes, I just have to get some things. She follows up. This is not about what I felt, right? Because you are skipping over a lot here. Okay, so she's saying, hey, you skipping around. It's not really keeping in succinction with everything that was said. Estavio says, what did you write? She says, as much as you think you're Bruce Willis, you're not. Your kids were babies when we started dating, okay? And I'm guessing Bruce Willis would be a reference to Die Hard, you know, like this invincible character. If you saw him on social media on vacation with, it doesn't say, but I'm guessing that would be with Gina. It was heartbreaking. She says it could be. I was 7 years in. Like, yeah, I was ride or die. I was holding him down. I was doing all this crazy shit. So when he popped out with another woman, yeah, could be heartbreaking. And what about this about Gina? You wrote, I don't want to be a side piece, but I'll treat you as a king. You wanted to be the main girlfriend? She says in 2013, yes. You saw social media posts of Mr. Combs with other girlfriends and got angry, right? She says, can I speak? I was jealous of certain situations. Estavio says, did there come a time he suspected you were in a relationship with someone in the industry, Mr. Muscuddy? They come back to this Kid Cudi thing. She says, yes. Mr. Combs thought it could be good for your career if you collaborated with Mr. Muscuddy. She says, yes. Why did you begin your relationship with Mr. Muscuddy? Cassie says, we enjoyed each other's company. You were in a relationship with Mr. Combs. She says, we were on a break. But you were still doing freak-offs with him. Cassie says yes. So now she's in a relationship with Cudi during this so-called break with Diddy. But yet she was still doing freak-offs with the diddler. Okay? And keep in mind, this relationship was very short-lived, the one with Cuddy. After Mr. Combs found out by going through your phone, you went to see him. You knew he was upset. He previously attacked you. She says, yes, I thought I'd be safer with other people there. Judge says, let's take a break. Okay? Because remember, she's been, I don't even know what attack they're talking about. She's been attacked so many times. They come back. Okay, let's get Miss Ventura back and the jury. Estavio says your affair with Mr. Mescudi was only a month long, but you got a burner phone for it. She says, right. Mr. Combs kicked you in the back? Yes. Okay, so that is the kick in the back. This came up later in your relationship that you had cheated on him with Kid Cudi. Cassie says he brought it up quite a bit. So she stepped out with Cudi. He continues to bring it up throughout the duration of their relationship, okay? When he cheated, he said, well, you had an affair with Kid Cudi, right? She says sometimes. So he would hold it over her head. Whenever he did some foul shit, he'd be like, well, you fucked with Kid Cudi. So I'm sure y'all have heard shit like that in y'all time. Like, the whataboutisms. Well, what about when you, man, that was years ago. You still gonna hold it on my head so you could do some fuck shit? He suspected you of having an affair with another person in the industry. You were in South Africa filming. She says, yes, honey 3. While you were there, you saw a photo of Mr. Combs with Gina and were irate, right? She says angry. You blocked him and focused on the movie, right? She says, I tried my best. Mr. Combs suspected you of a relationship with whom? Michael B. Jordan, okay? So this is where Michael B. Jordan comes into the picture. You sent the video not only to Mr. Combs, but also to staff. Who, D-Rock? She says, yes. You sent it to them because you were angry with all of them? She says, I was hurt. I spent all my time with them. You thought they were in on it. Okay, so she sent the video, I guess, very angry after seeing Diddy out with Gina, and most likely the whole squad being in on it the same way as her. Like, y'all just letting this happen? Y'all ain't looking out for me? Y'all ain't keeping him away from these other hoes? Okay? But of course, I wouldn't be surprised if all of these women that he was dealing with was getting a freak off too, all right? Well, we shall continue. You thought they were in on it. The physical abuse, when did your father learn about it? She says, same time as my mother. Did Mr. Combs come to Connecticut to speak to your parents? She says, I don't know if it was then. Carrie Morgan knew about the abuse? She says, yes. The eyebrow gash incident, what was it about? Didn't answer the phone and went to sleep. I was supposed to be packing for a trip. So now we have an eyebrow gash. He was inebriated? She says, I don't remember that. Why were you asleep? She said a drink at the Abbey had something in it, I think, okay? So she's saying somebody drugged her drink. Did Mr. Combs ever abuse you while he was inebriated, then say he didn't remember it? She said yes. So he would pop up, fucked up, and beat her up, and then say he didn't remember after it happened, after he comes down off his high. Did you feel like he was not taking responsibility? Yes, I think anybody would. For drugs, you'd both go to rehab? She says rehab wasn't really a thing during our relationship. The freak-offs were an opportunity for you to take drugs together? She says yes. You went a lot to Burning Man? She confirms yes. Did you ever call yourselves get high partners? Cassie says we did. Did you take drugs from him without him knowing it? Cassie says yes. At this point, I'm sure she was addicted. What was his reaction? Explosive. Did he tell LA dealers not to deal to you? She says yes. Okay? Which is another element of control, right? Y'all are both using drugs together. Sometimes she's taking the drugs. I mean, you got her hooked on this shit. So then she says that he's cutting her off from the drug dealers, okay? You told Miss Coram that you learned only after the fact that Mr. Combs had dangled Miss Bongolan off the balcony. She says, I'm not sure. You were on drugs? Cassie says, I'm not sure. You got a life coach for your drug use, according to this document? Cassie says, I don't know who that person is. Estavio says you were doing a lot of drugs. Cassie says it was a rough time. You tried to get into a rehab, the Golden Door. Cassie says it was a spa. There was a time I lost all sense of smell and taste and woke up in a hospital with an IV in my arm. I tried them to get help. So from one hand, they're calling it a rehab. She says it was a spa. Interesting. The time after San Bernardino, you learned that he had overdosed. Okay, Diddy overdosed. Cassie says a very strong opiate, yes. Were you ever not addicted to painkillers? She says, I took Ibogaine. Where did you get it? Cassie says, Cancun, Mexico, separately. When Mr. Combs threw you off the boat in Cannes, when he accused you of taking drugs and squeezed your leg, she says, among other things. But you still wanted to be with him. Cassie says, I did. Estavio says, switching topics, when you say Mr. Combs went with guns to find Suge Knight, do you remember telling the government that you did go with them? She says, no. Estavio says, let me show you. So they're trying to say that she told the government that she was literally with him. It's been established earlier in the testimony during the week that she told him not to go. She wasn't actually present. Okay, so now they're pulling this up. All right. Cassie says, I did not go with them, so I don't think I said that. Estavio says, you also did drugs with Miss Morgan, right? Cassie confirms. She says, yes. Do you recall telling the government that you did not see what he did hitting her in the head with a wooden hanger? Okay. So at this point, this is Diddy hitting Miss Carrie Morgan in the head with a wooden hanger. Okay. So he's lashing out, not only beating up on Cassie, but also their friend, a mutual friend, Miss Carrie Morgan. Okay. Cassie says, I saw the hanger. I saw he was angry that I was doing drugs with Carrie. They say this broke up your 17-year friendship with her. Cassie says it did. Did you tell Mr. Combs about your relationship with your now husband? Cassie says no. Miss Morgan sued you and Mr. Combs. Cassie says made a demand. And you paid part of that? Cassie says I did. And you haven't spoken with her since? Cassie says maybe one text. That was the relationship ender? She confirms yes. You would heat up the baby oil. Okay, we're getting back to baby oil and freak off talk, all right? So now they're asking how she heated it up. Yes. Now, is this from the day before the Intercontinental Hotel incident? U.S. Attorney Johnson says this is a long document. We need time to read it. Judge says we'll take a break then. They come back 4:08 p.m. This is still Thursday. Judge says we're in the home stretch of the day. Let's get our jury back. All rise. Estavio says, is this from March 4th? U.S. Attorney says with UCT time, it is March 3rd. Estavio says, okay, Mr. Combs refers to accessories. Cassie says for the premiere. You sent him an explicit message. Cassie confirms yes. He responded with a number of M's. He wrote, too bad you have to work, LOL. She says he did. You ask him, are you feeling better? Then he's discussing bodily function. Yes. Cassie says, could we just clarify what time these messages are really from with the UCT? U.S. Attorney says there's a stipulation on that. Estavio says, Mr. Combs went to your premiere lunch at London Hotel. Cassie says he did. Estavio then says, Estavio says, then he says, I just got out of a spiritual therapy session. Cassie, I asked, how did it go? He said, it's a process. This is leading up to the hotel incident. Estavio says, you say, baby, I want to F.O. so bad. All right. So now they're saying, hey, we got you right here saying you wanted to freak off so bad. You was looking forward to it. You were asked in your direct and you said you didn't want him to ruin your premiere. Cassie says, sure. Estavio says, Mr. Combs says if we start at 7 p.m. and go until 4 a.m., you can get enough rest after. She says yes, so she agreed to the parameters of 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. Estavio says he's saying it'd be shorter than a usual freak off. Cassie says that's how I would understand it, so they was going beyond 4 a.m. from 7 p.m. in a traditional freak off. Now, who the is fucking from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. in any world other than hell? We'll continue. Estavio says, what do you say? Cassie says, Carrie is here. We can't do it at my house. So she's declining. Hey, we're not doing it at my spot, homie. Estavio says, you say that guy is sick. I'm not going to ask what you meant. Well, why not? You've been asking everything else. So Estavio comes back. So you were turning to Johnny. Was he a dancer or an escort? Cassie says, we hired him as a dancer, but he did what an escort does. Okay, so he was hired to, he worked as a dancer, but he was doing a little bit more than dance, all right? Do you remember the beginning of this freak off in the Intercontinental? She says, not really. Estavio says the drugs were bad, MDMA, right? Cassie says, I have no idea. So apparently they're saying that there was some fucked up drugs here. Judge says it's 5 o'clock. Jurors, you may go home. Do not look up anything about the case. Damn, that's how it ended? Shit. Thank you, Miss Ventura. No discussions with the government. We'll see you tomorrow. Everyone else may be seated. Witness leaves. Judge says, how much more? Estavio says, let me check. U.S. Attorney Johnson says half an hour on redirect. Agnifilo says we'll figure it out tomorrow. Tomorrow being Friday. Judge says, have your next witness ready tomorrow. Who are they? Okay, U.S. Attorney then says Don Richard. If there are more issues, Judge said, someone needs to email the court. Again, this was issued off docket. That is a footnote from Inner City Press saying all this shit y'all talking about is not on the record. Okay. Here they say Wild Side for sale. I don't know what this is a quote of or where it came from. You think you're going to trick me? Reading my old text, the drugs I took, my wild side for sale, but I can take breaks 10 minutes at a time. He's the one who'll be in jail forever, not me. I don't know where this comes from. Someone can let me know. All right, so now we get to day 5 of the trial. Cassie to an agent to Don. All right, this is a recap of both days. Judge says the government has said the defense's cross-examination can go until 4:30 p.m. today, and they'll limit themselves to 30 minutes of redirect. All right, Estavio comes in and says we have evidentiary issues. And you see they said Dawn the previous day. Okay, judge says tell me about them. Should have been in writing. So Diddy's defense keeps coming to the judge day of instead of letting the judge know what the fuck going on ahead of time. Estavio says, we don't understand why they are taking time objecting to our exhibits. U.S. Attorney Johnson says they are proposing to use a video of Mr. Combs walking in nature talking about God. It is improper, invited jury nullification. Judge says, let's hear it. Combs speaking about God. Estavio says this was about him being in rehab, which Miss Ventura didn't remember, so we want to refresh her recollection with this. U.S. Attorney Johnson says it cannot be played for her in front of the jury. Estavio says we have headphones. Okay. Judge says our jury is ready. Any more issues? Estavio says if the SA is after the charged conduct, it shouldn't have come in. It's a huge issue for us. Okay. Judge said it's not a huge issue. You didn't raise it at the time. Estavio says we thought we could cross on it. Okay. As you can see, these are the debates between the judge and prosecution and Diddy's defense. Okay. All rise, judge says. Good morning. You are still under oath. Miss Ventura. Estavio says you believe Mr. Combs was blackout for the Intercontinental event. Cassie says, I believe he was intoxicated. Everyone's definition is different. Estavio says, but you said blackout. What did you write here? Cassie says, I wrote, when you get fucked up the wrong way. Estavio says, you meant drugs? She says, and alcohol. Crossfaded. Here, Mr. Combs writes to you, I am so horny for you. U.S. Attorney Johnson says, this is not an evidence. Okay, they keep springing things up. Estavio says, here, Mr. Combs is asking you for sex soon after the Intercontinental, right? Cassie says, I was saying who he felt. I'm guessing she meant how he felt. Again, there's some typos in here. Estavio says, what did you write back? She says, I wrote, we need a different vibe than Friday at the Intercontinental. Okay, so this is after I'm guessing what happened on camera at the Intercontinental, because the Intercontinental is where that video was filmed of him brutally beating her, right? Security ends up coming up, saving her, letting her go. But then by Friday, they're about to get back to it. So they're trying to show from their perspective that she was willingly coming back, right? Others would say she's coming back because she's got Stockholm syndrome. She's being loyal to her oppressor, her abuser, which happens to people all the time. How is she supposed to get out when she's contractually bound to him? He controls how much money she makes. She wants to make new music. They're in the studio recording. He never puts none of that music out. Her career is in his hands. She has no choice but to come back. What else is she going to do? Those are the two conflicting viewpoints. All right. Estavio says, Mr. Combs wrote, fuck Friday. I don't even want to do that again. What did you write? She says, I wrote LOL. True. All right. Mr. Combs suspected you of having an affair with someone else in the industry. What happened when he took your phone? Cassie says, we were in a car and he told me to call my mother. When I did, he grabbed my phone and took it. Okay. He said, call your mama. Then he snatches up her phone. Estavio says it was a big fight. Then Cassie says he was just gone. For how long? She says a few hours until my mother called the police. Estavio says, did Mr. Combs go through your phone? Cassie says, I think so. And he called someone on it. The person you had an affair with, an NFL player, Cassie says, I don't know if he's playing anymore. Estavio says, but he was an NFL player and he was jealous. Wasn't there a time he found out you were dancing with another person in the entertainment industry? All right. So there was another guy, some guy who played in the NFL who's not being identified, that she may have had a little side action with. Then now they're getting to somebody she was dancing with in a club or something. Cassie says, I don't remember. Okay. Estavio says it was Chris Brown. She says, I was not dancing with him. Okay. They pull it up. They say, look at this. It's from 2013. Cassie says, now I see. Okay. So I guess there's a photo of her dancing with Chris Brown. Estavio says, look at, oh no, I already said that. What else did Mr. Combs take? She says, my car, my passport when he was angry. So he would take access to her whip and her passport so that she can't flee and get around. Estavio says, let's refresh you about Mr. Combs being in rehab. Cassie says, I vaguely remember. Why did you go to Sedona? Cassie says, I went to Arizona to get away from the drugs. Estavio says, I'm going to go to a new topic. Mr. Combs told you to get the video you'd heard about. What did you write? Cassie says, I wrote, you keep putting me down. Estavio says, I'm going to play you some audio. This is audio of Cassie saying, if you saw a video of someone fucking me, who was fucking me? You have it. Why didn't you show me? Okay, so Diddy allegedly was telling her he had video of her sleeping with somebody else. She says, if you got it, then show me what it is. Produce the proof. She said, you have it. Why didn't you show me? This is, I guess, Diddy response saying, because I'm not disrespectful, bro. Cassie says, if you don't show me, I will kill you, cut you up. Still the audio playing for the jury. Cassie says, I can kill you. I've never killed anyone in my life. I'm going to fuck you up. It's not going to be blood on my hands. Someone else is going to do it. I'm not playing with you, Suji. Tell me. Okay, so this isn't Diddy. Okay, or maybe it is. She says Sujit. I don't know who Sujit is. But clearly it ain't Diddy. They asked, that was you, right? Cassie says yes. Did Mr. Combs express concern about these videos being released? Cassie says when? Ever. Cassie says yes. The escort Jonathan. You thought he took a video? She says yes. Now, Jonathan, if I'm not mistaken, that's the Jonathan Oddi guy, the guy from South Africa, the dude that got them crazy ass videos talking about DJ Khaled and Diddy and all that nasty, crazy shit he was talking about. So now he's being brought up in the courtroom and I'm fucking flabbergasted. Because I thought it was bullshit. They bring it up in the court and say it all casually. The escort Jonathan, you thought he took a video? She says yes. Okay. Estavio says Mr. Combs spent a lot of money to make sure the video did not get released. She says, I don't know. You had a conversation with Jonathan Oddi that was transcribed? Cassie says, I'm not sure. He was volatile. She said, I didn't trust him. And he definitely didn't have a very trustworthy looking appearance. I'll tell you that much. So that must have been the video. Okay. Estavio says, what did Mr. Combs say when you told him you thought Mr. Oddi was recording? Cassie says he said he'd take care of it. Are you aware of an escort leaving comments on Mr. Combs' Instagram page? Cassie says, I am not. Now let's talk about rehab. Do you still use Subazone? I don't even know what the fuck that is. Let me look that up real quick, man. All right, so Subazone is an addiction treatment medication, all right? It's supposed to help you get over your drug addiction, okay? So she says something like it. What does it treat? Opioid addiction. I guess I could have just read further. Johnson says, objection! Overruled. You wrote a book in rehab. The place treats sexual compulsion. Objection! Sidebar, judge says. They're back. Estavio says, did you get neurofeedback therapy? Cassie says, yes. What is it? They hook something up to your head and show you things. See how you react. Were you told the effects of it? Cassie says, help me with my trauma. Estavio says, did you participate in EMDR? Cassie says, yes. What does it do? She says, memories and processing them. Estavio says, the idea is you recall prior traumatic memories, like for PTSD. You are being treated for PTSD. Yes. Okay, so I'm guessing this is all after the relationship with Diddy. She's taking addiction medication, opioid addiction medication, because she got hooked to drugs while she was with him. Okay. She's doing EMDR, which is helping her to get her memory back. Right? They're treating her for PTSD. We know PTSD is typically treated for people who were at war. You know what I'm saying? People with traumatic head injuries, all type of stuff, man. Athletes that played in like full contact sports, you know what I mean? Now, of course, PTSD can be diagnosed for people that grow up in rough neighborhoods and things of that nature too, because all the crazy shit that goes on in your environment. But we know typically it's some high contact stuff going on. Really fucked up things. All right, we'll keep going. She says, I was still physically developing. Estavio says, you were 22. Cassie says, women keep developing after 22, don't you think? Estavio says, but you're not suggesting you were still physically developing after 22. Cassie says, I am not. Okay? Think she meant physically developing as a person, but I don't know what she's saying. Okay? This message is about having a freak out without ketamine, right? U.S. Attorney Johnson says, may I confer with counsel? Judge says, no, but we'll take a break. Jury leaves. More coming with jury out. Judge says, witness list by Sunday, 5 p.m. So the witness list for this upcoming week is due today. But will this and other filings, this is once again these little bracket joints, that's inner city press asking questions on the side. But will this and other filings, which are clearly judicial documents, be in the docket? He's saying all this stuff that keeps coming up in the courtroom is not being properly filed. As for these long text messages, use binders so we can save time. Now, real break, okay? They come back. Estavio says, Mr. Combs wrote, you're so predictable. You've said you were going to tell him you didn't want to do freakouts anymore, but you didn't say it, did you? Cassie says, I did not. Okay? So she was supposed to tell him she wanted out of this shit, but for whatever reason, she didn't. Here you were suggesting freak off with a girl. You say you found a photo of Mr. Combs with Gina while you were staying with your parents in Connecticut, right? Ventura says yes. You decided to break up with him and he didn't threaten you, but suggested couples counseling, okay? So this is the defense here. This is Diddy's lawyer saying, hey, at this point, you say you wanted to break up with Diddy and he didn't threaten you. He actually suggested couples counseling. He wanted to find an amicable way for y'all to move forward with therapy. Cassie says, I don't know. Estavio says in August 2018, you called it a closure conversation. Mr. Combs was inviting you to Burning Man, right? Cassie says yes. Estavio says, I'll read Mr. Combs. You have anger. Cassie says, I wrote, my family knows I am not running around telling our business. Right? Because remember, Cassie mama found out about shit going on from the internet. She found blind items. And eventually the shit just got too excessive where she had to come clean. Cassie says, I wrote, I don't need you to be taking take of Kim and Gina. I mean, it must say taking care of them. Like, fuck them is basically what she said. I needed you to put me first. Okay? She said, I need you to cut them off. Which with Kim was never going to happen because they had children. Estavio says, please read these. Cassie says, I wrote, you lied to me. She never went away. It was the nail in the coffin. Estavio says, you meant Gina in the photo. She says, yes. Okay, so Diddy claims that he had cut off Gina, but then he kept going and seeing her and being with her on the low-doh, all right? Estavio says, in your civil lawsuit, you say Mr. Combs SA'd you, and y'all know I use that as a cloaking mechanism. September 18th, 2018, after you had dinner at an Italian restaurant in Malibu, right? She says, yes. Did you meet with the U.S. on November 30th, 2023? Cassie says, yes, not the exact date. In this meeting, you said the essay took place after Mr. Combs returned from Burning Man. You said he was acting strangely at that dinner. Cassie says, I don't remember exactly that word. Did you meet the U.S. on April 8th, 2025? Cassie says, around then. This message to FB, who's that? Ventura, Frank Black, a name he used. Remember he called himself Frank Black? He wrote, I'm in an investors conference. We'll get back to this. You still have love for him? She says, I have love for the past and what it was. After yet another sidebar, Estavio comes back. You wrote, I didn't mean to be a bitch. I just don't get the time. He writes, just need you to be positive, correct? Yes. So he's telling her to be positive when she's pleading with him that, you know, she's not being treated the way she wants. Estavio, DX1309. This is about a yoga instructor. Cassie says, yep. What did you write? Cassie says, I wrote, I've stopped even caring. Estavio says, but you did care. Yeah. So he said, you could date other people. Let's just talk about it, correct? She says, yes. Okay. So at this point, Diddy is allowing her to go do her thing outside of him. What did you write? Cassie wrote, I do love you. I would just prefer not being one of your girlfriends. Let's get up tomorrow night. I'll do studio from 6 to 9. He writes, "Can I hold you, or are you just going to break up with me?" Okay. So there's supposed to be some sort of, she could go off and do her thing, right? Trying to break it off, I suppose. She lets it be known she does love him. She just don't want to be one of his joints. She's willing to go to the studio from 6 to 9 where they can be together. Okay, he says, "Can I hold you? Or are you just going to break up with me?" Okay. Which I think is also a manipulation tactic on my own opinion, but my opinion is not in the court documents or being judged by a jury. They say, "And you write back, 'We can embrace,' LOL. And you wanted to hug him, right?" She says, "That's what I said." "Did you have sexual intercourse with Mr. Combs that night?" She says, "I did, of course." "And during that, your now husband FaceTimed you?" "Yes." So at this point, she's already dating Alex. They're supposed to be going their separate ways. They meeting up at the studio. Next thing you know, they're making a different type of music, okay? "During that time, your now husband FaceTimed you?" She says, "Yes." "Your now husband didn't know you were with Mr. Combs at the time?" Cassie says, "I don't know what he knew." Stavio says later he discovered it. Objection! Overruled. You told, I hate these typos. "You told your husband you was SA'd?" Cassie says, "Not that evening. After Miss Porter's memorial service, you wrote to him that you were going home. Why had he called Kim his soulmate? What was the 11 years all about?" She says, "Yes." So she was still jealous after Kim had passed away, because he was so locked in with her despite having Cassie around for an entire 11 years. "That was hurtful," she says. "At that time, yes. And after the memorial service, you never saw Mr. Combs again." Okay? She said, "I did not." "He let you go, right?" Cassie says, "I never saw him again. I don't know about letting me go." Stavio says, "You got married to the love of your life, right?" Judge breaks. They're back. Judge says, "Let's get this done before the jury returns." Stavio says, "We still think it's appropriate for this message to come in." Johnson says, "We still have issues with phrases like 'I'd like to reconnect.' What state of mind is this being offered for?" Judge says, "There are portions that are properly admissible, so this needs to be redacted if it's going to be admitted into evidence. For example, in the 5th paragraph, 'I've been getting my life together.' No." Stavio says, "We can get that in through other exhibits." Judge says, "You can redact it right now." Stavio says, "I will do it right now." Combs, Tinigaragos on exhibits and redactions. Stavio says, "I want to say we are going to finish with Cross faster than he thought, probably before the next break. Agnifilo, may I speak with the government for 1 minute? Bring the jury back." Jury enters. Estavio says, "Miss Ventura, we're almost done here." Cassie thanks Estavio. "I will read Mr. Combs' messages. You're going to make a beautiful mother. God bless." Cassie says, "I said thank you. God bless. I wrote we should talk and have closure." Mr. Combs sent back a tear face emoji. He said, "You are always my ride or die. So this is the official break off. Dunzo, okay?" Cassie says, "I thought it was nice." "You'd been craving that?" She says, "Before. I don't think I was craving now." Stavio says, "He shaped you over 11 years." Stavio says, "You shaped each other?" She says, "Yes." "Your husband's a physical trainer?" "Yes." "The house you grew up in Connecticut was relatively modest compared to mansions." So I guess they're about to they're comparing her upbringing of her the finances of her upbringing compared to what she was introduced with Diddy, right? "The house you grew up in Connecticut was relatively modest compared to mansions." She says, "Yes." "You are preparing to tour with a Matt Testa?" She says, "Yes, he's an engineer." "Once you settled your lawsuit, you canceled the tour, right?" Cassie says, "Yes." "Because you no longer needed the money?" Cassie says that wasn't the reason, all right? So they say, you was going on tour before all this. Now you got you a little 20 million. You don't want to go out and sing your music no more? She said it wasn't because of that. Gustavio says, after the hotel video came out, you posted on Instagram that domestic violence is the issue, right? Cassie says, yes, I still feel that way. DX 1015, Mr. Combs wrote, want to freak off one last time? And what did you write? Cassie says, I don't want it to be the last time. I want to freak off for the first time. Oh my God. Woo, shit. That don't look good. Okay. Gustavio says, no further questions. Redirect. All right. So now we've got U.S. Attorney Johnson saying, Ms. Ventura, you were shown this message where you ended. I don't want to freak off for the last time. I want it to be the first time for the rest of our lives. What did you say after that? Cassie says, yes, I'm horny. Just got over a UTI. Okay. U.S. Attorney says, you were shown messages today in which you and Sean were kind and loving. Ventura says, yes, that's Cassie. Did those periods ever last? Objection! Judge overruled. Cassie says, no, they didn't last. There's a downswing. What world did Sean open up to you? Cassie says, a world of chaos. In your 11-year relationship, who did you want to have sex with? Cassie says, only him at that time. When Sean wrote, seduce me all day, what did you do? Cassie says, write about freak-offs. Were you able to cancel work obligations for freak-offs? Cassie says, yes, I was told to. Okay? So, what I've never heard of in Diddy's 30 years of being the mogul was him canceling what the fuck he had to do. But since she wasn't much of an artist. She only dropped one album, had 9 left on her contract. She still had other shit she had to do. But she was expected to cancel her shit to keep freaking off, while he was able to keep freaking off and doing mogul shit. Okay? They say, when you were shooting the movie in South Africa and you blocked him, how did he contact you? She said, through Mia. He said he didn't remember hurting you. Did you believe him? Cassie said, not always, because I knew him. There were times he was pretty aware of what he was doing. It's just who he was. I'd seen him be violent with other people. She was not the only person he was violent with, which has been detailed numerous times. On the way back from Cannes, what did Sean do? He played a video of me having sex with an escort. What'd he say he'd do? She said he'd release it, all right? So here we go back into the coercion of it all, right? They're traveling together, and each time they have downtime on these trips, he keeps showing her videos of herself having sex with these escorts, saying, I'm gonna release this shit. Okay? So let's not act like there's no coercion going on here. When you go to New York, what did Sean ask for? A freak off, or he'd release it. So here is a situation where the freak off is being held over her head. If you ain't freaking with me, I'm releasing you freaking with somebody else. Okay? Johnson says, when Sean wrote you ready for the night, what did he mean? Freak off. What were you afraid he would do if you did not do that freak off? Objection! Overruled. Cassie says, I don't know that week. Next question. Do you have any doubt that Sean SA'd you? Objection! Overruled. She said, I have no doubt. After Sean SA'd you on August 18th, did you later have consensual sex with Sean during which your now husband FaceTimed you? She says yes. That's some uncomfortable stuff. So he took it at one point, and then y'all had a consensual interaction later. Johnson says, why did you cancel the tour? Cassie says, after I filed my civil suit, I was overwhelmed. Addressing the past the way that I chose to was overwhelming. I didn't want to go. Do you plan to file more lawsuits? She says, no. Would you give the $20 million back if you hadn't had to do freak offs? Objection! Overruled. Cassie says, I would give it back to get my agency back. So she said, if I could literally get my agency back, if I could just be the girl I was, and this is me implying, if I could get back the girl I was at 22, 21, 22, I would get his 20 million back. All right. Did he beat you during freak offs? Cassie says yes. She begins to cry. Were you open to freak offs at the beginning? She says at the beginning. Did you tell him when you no longer wanted to do them? Cassie says yes, more than once. What concerns did you have about saying no to freak offs? Safety, career, love. Okay. She feared for her safety. She feared for her career. And she feared for her love because she did have a sick, twisted love relationship with this guy. No further questions. Judge says, Mrs. Stavio, you knew Mr. Combs' sexual preferences was these freak offs, right? She said, I learned. Okay, so this is how he liked to do things. Okay, he didn't like that one-on-one stuff. They said it was part of being his girlfriend. She says, yeah. You kept your old device? Yes. And freak off videos in this case, they were all on those devices you kept from 2012 and 2014. Cassie says, I don't know what year. You were able to stand at his side at the Met Gala. Being his girlfriend gave you access to producers. She says, yes. Beyond Kid Cudi, what other musicians were you put in the studio with? Were you put in the studio with Nicki Minaj? She says, yes. Note, this is the first and so far only reference to Nicki Minaj in this trial. He got caught up in some Nicki Minaj stuff that the Barbs threw him out there with some bullshit. That's why he put that in there. That's a inner city press note. We'll continue. Estavio, you were put in the studio with Lil Wayne. Yes. And with Rick Ross and Pusha T. Am I forgetting any names? She says, you've got a lot of names. You are self-conscious about your musical talent. She says, I wouldn't say that. So they're bringing up all the people that she got to work with in the studio because of Diddy. You've had a bad performance on 106 in Park. She says, early in my career. You did music videos. Were they successful? Judge says, may we have a sidebar? Okay, they get a sidebar. They come back. D-Rock was like a member of your family. She says, yes, like a brother. Now, remember, D-Rock is security for Diddy. Okay? And he's privy to all the bullshit. When Diddy goes upside her head, D-Rock helps her ice her wounds and stuff like that. Like some crazy shit going on around here. She says, yes, like a brother. The assistant Mia, you also had a friendship with her. She says, yes. Okay. Here you begin with an explicit message and he responds with one. You are actively sexting. You stated that you were feeling overwhelmed after filing your civil lawsuit, right? Cassie says, yes. You recently received a settlement from the Intercontinental. She says, no. You made a demand. She says, yes, 10 million maybe. Anything further? U.S. Attorney Johnson says, I just have one question. Judge says, I was asking Mrs. Stavio, can you wrap up in 2 minutes? Stavio says, this is the last thing I'll ask you to read, Miss Ventura. She says, thank you. We need closure and understanding. Okay. Johnson says, why'd you keep your devices? Cassie says, I was afraid of what was on them. I wouldn't take them to the Apple store. Stavio says, one question. You just reached $10 million settlement with Intercontinental last week before trial. Damn, she got paid last week. She got 10 mil. Objection. Overruled. Yes. So she got a total of 30 out of all this. She got 10 million from the Intercontinental, right? Which she was entitled to. Let's be fucking clear. Because they got bought out for they goddamn tapes. They were aiding and abetting the abuse. They sold out. So yeah, as a company, I needs my damages. I don't give a fuck. We'll continue. So now we have a special agent coming in. Agnifilo says, we object the testimony of the witness after the special agent, Don Richard. They don't want her to be used. They want to get rid of Don. Judge says, why is this coming up at 3:30 p.m.? Go forward. You just address things before the courtroom. Right? We halfway into the day. Now all of a sudden you don't want her to come through? Fuck is up with you? Inner City Press says, so why are submissions not on the docket? Once again, he's like, man, this just keeps happening. All this crazy shit is happening in the courtroom and it's not being put into the docket. What is going on? Let me make sure it didn't go too far. Okay, so U.S. Attorney Smizer comes in. Good afternoon. Where do you work? We got Special Agent Yasin Binda, HSI, in the Human Trafficking Group. I'm in the Crisis Negotiation Group, too. Did you serve subpoenas in this case? Binda says yes. When Sean Combs arrested, where did you go? Binda says the Park Hyatt, room 21115, where he was staying. Okay. Photo of entrance shown to jury. What did you do? We assigned a letter to each room and began the search. What was your role? Binda says I took photographs of items, then signed them on the 6051 form. Was found in the I guess you're asking, what was found in the closet? Photos shown, plastic bags full of Johnson & Johnson baby oil and Astroglide bottles. Okay. What was found in the bathroom? Several bottles of baby oil. Just baby oil all over the premises. Now the bedroom. What was found in the LV bag? Medication in the name of Frank Black. How the hell you getting prescriptions to Frank Black? And that is this. What is this, I guess? Bags of pink powder found in the medicine bottle. Okay? I'm guessing this is the pink cocaine shit that they talk about. Okay. Stipulations shown agreeing it was found and tested by Customs and Border Patrol lab. The pink powder was found to be ketamine and MDMA in bottle. Physical evidence is passed around to jury. The photos shown. What was found in the black mini pack bag? Binda says $9,000. Please take the cash out of the bag. Agent Binda does, fanning out the bills. No further questions. Any cross? Garagos gets in here. In the hotel room, did you see any bags and clothing indicting that woman was staying with him there? Binda says yes. The U.S. may call its next witness. Your Honor, the government calls Don Richard. Okay, so now Don is on the stand. Where are you from? Don says New Orleans, Louisiana. From 2004 to 2011, who did you work for? Puff, Sean Combs. Do you see him? She says yes. Who is depicted in this photo? Don says Cassie. In 2009, did you observe an incident between Puff and Cassie? Don says she was attacked by Sean Combs, kicked. Did you see more violence by him against Cassie? Don says often. Okay, we got a photo of Diddy Dirty Money, the group. When were you a member of this group? Don says 2009 to 2011. The incident in 2009 when Sean Combs beat Cassie, where was it? She says in Sean Combs' LA home. We were recording. What did he do? Don says he was saying, where the fuck is my food? He grabbed a black skillet with eggs and tried to hit her over the head. Cassie dropped to the ground. What did she do? Don says she went into fetal position. Okay? And this is the same incident that Don talked about in her own lawsuit. Okay? Then what? Sean Combs was kicking her in the head and body, then dragged her up to the first floor, glass breaking and yelling. I was scared for her and for me too. They ask if she intervened. Dawn says no. Did you call the police? She says no. The next day, what happened? That it has been passionate and she was okay, huh? Oh, I guess she was told that he was. Hey, we all got passionate here, but she's all right. That it would be better if we didn't talk. That people could end up missing. What the hell? What the helly? What you talking about? People coming up missing? They say, how did you understand that? Dawn says death. Agnifilo jumps in. Objection! Sidebar. Back from sidebar. Subramanian comes in, jurors. You can leave for the weekend. Watch the Yankees play the Mets or the Knicks. If you're not into sports, there's a lot going on. See you Monday. Okay, jurors leave. Judge says, Miss Richard, you can leave. Judge says about this line of testimony. All right, U.S. Attorney Comey comes in and says this shows consciousness of guilt for count one and relevant to count one. Agnifilo says it's not traffic, it's domestic violence. Judge says, why didn't you bring a motion in limine on this? Agnifilo says, I don't know. I didn't know. In limine on this? Agnifilo says, we cannot sit here and say Miss Ventura did anything because of this event because she didn't talk about this one. So this is rank speculation. Judge says, but she was there. Agnifilo says she doesn't know the effect on Cassie Ventura. Judge says, who are the next witnesses? Kami says Carrie Morgan. So Miss Morgan, who was friends with both Diddy and Cassie, had been abused by Diddy just as a friend being present. She will be testifying. They also have David James. Okay. Judge says, so that's it. I'll have a word in the robing room with Miss Kami and Mr. Agnifilo. I don't need court reporter. Okay. Inner City Press says, and that might be a problem. Now, Inner City Press has actually written to the court asking them literally why they're not filing all of these exhibits and things that are being submitted to evidence or things that are coming out that haven't been submitted to evidence. Why all of this is not being filed. All these sidebar conversations, going in the back room with the attorneys. Inner City Press is like, what the hell are these private conversations and why are we not privileged to know what the fuck is going on, all right? I don't know how that works. I'm not a legal professional, but he is concerned. And he's cited legal precedent as to why they should explain what the fuck is going on. Okay, so here we have Juror 330. Diddy is the jury that I want to be on. As the UN's junkets dwindle, I'll lie on what I do. If you haven't heard of Dushanbe, how can you exclude me? I'm the president of my condo board, and if I cash out on this trial, I'll cite immunity. There's no due process in the UN, so why shouldn't I be on it? I don't know what the fuck these things are. That shit ain't got nothing to do with me, all right? That nigga from Inner City Press, he be doing a little poetry and goddamn parody songs and shit too. I don't know what the fuck he got going on. But when it comes to the happenings in the court, he's pretty good at keeping up with that shit, all right? So that's what we have. The Agnifilo and them want Don's testimony to be stricken from the record because Cassie didn't talk about that specific incident. I don't see how that has anything to do with it. She's a witness. They ask her if she was present for abuse. She comes in and shows and says, hey, I was. They say, since Cassie didn't mention it, we shouldn't use it. We'll see how that goes come tomorrow. You know, there's going to be way more that comes out. We'll just see how this thing gets handled moving forward. And again, I don't know shit, man. All I can give you is what happened. Diddy is on trial for trafficking. And of course, again, trafficking also includes transporting escorts in and out of state lines. Also includes coercion. If Cassie is being coerced into doing this, if things are being held over her head, I'm going to release these tapes if you don't do this freak off. We also see that there's moments where Cassie allegedly wanted to be a part of the freak-offs, right? Well, I won't even say allegedly. She admitted to it, right? But she's also getting high as a motherfucking kite, right? She's under his guidance. This is all a lifestyle that he introduced her to. She's supposed to be his top madam or whatever. So I can't say what's going to happen, what he's going to be found guilty on or anything. I'd rather not even try to place my thumb onto it, right? Y'all let me know what y'all think of all this down below in the comments. Be sure to like and share this video. If this is your first time seeing me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, become an insider. I will catch y'all on the next one, and we'll see how this thing heats up coming into the week.
King of my city and cul-de-sac. Coming out swinging like soldier rag. Leading my people like quarterback. Boy, I study this shit, I'm an almanac. Had to get up and grind. Knowledge is booming, I'm here to apply. Came with the chip and the dip, it just single the mind. We finna do more than survive. I need my check. Spinning the block for the Gouda. We hitting the jeweler to flood out the net. We don't do beef for computers, I'm straight out the sewer. We come when you rest. Niggas be looking perplexed, so keeping my foot on their neck. No map, I trust my gut for the quest. With drama, I'm fully abreast. I was ready for years and they doubted me. All of a sudden they tell me they proud of me. I been dropping these haters like calories. Cross them out, I came back with some boundaries. Stand for my honor, but too raw, no corner. Packing the stick with a drummer. Wanna catch my bad, won't fumble. I done came too far to be humble.